Well, Hurricane Lee is making its way close to Maine, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. We take a look at the latest forecast track. So we're already on track for quite the year for billion-dollar disasters in the U.S., even when adjusted for inflation. You can see through August, 2023 is beating any of the previous years. And one of those billion-dollar disasters was a hailstorm in the Twin Cities back in early August. You can see a lot of them are severe weather related within the central U.S. But of course, Hurricane Idalia, one of those billion-dollar disasters, and we are not done with hurricane season. A fair reminder of that is Hurricane Lee, which ironically is something that the Northeast is having to worry about. So there's Lee churning right now, a Category 2 hurricane, sustained wind speeds at 100 miles an hour, moving pretty much straight north, expected to start to curve a little bit to the northeast. And of course, the issue has been, despite being an El Nino year, which tends to have more shear, less favorable for hurricanes, we've got just tons of warm water everywhere. The Atlantic is definitely hot. The reason you see this little blue puddle, that's Hurricane Lee. Hurricanes do churn up the water, and it is the atmosphere's solution to overly hot water. But we also have to watch about this next system behind Lee. This is the 7-day outlook, an area that we're probably gonna have to watch for more tropical development. So while the actual water temperatures are cool, as one expects just south of Maine, this is why they don't typically get tropical systems. The water is above normal. So we are seeing hot waters all along the Northeast. Still not conducive for hurricanes, but if it weakens at the last minute, you still have a very powerful storm hitting potentially a place like Maine, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick. So the official track for Hurricane Lee brings it into Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, the center of it, probably late Saturday. This is a slight shift east from previous forecasts that brought it into Maine. Still not out of the woods. We've got hurricane watches for some of those areas. And when we look at the spaghetti plots, all the different models bunched together, they do all seem to have a consensus of keeping the center of Lee at least just east of most of Maine, but there's still going to be impacts here. And it's not completely a done deal yet. The NAM model is still churning towards potentially Maine. Whereas the European model is more in line with the forecast track from the Hurricane Center, puts it right in between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, but it's still very close to the coast, the northeast coast of Maine. So when we look at potential wind gusts, this is probably more of a worst case scenario because this is using NAM model wind gusts. We're talking hurricane force gusts at least along the Maine coast. And part of the problem is it's been a very wet year. So we're going to see additional rainfall, as is often the case with these tropical systems, several inches of rain on top of already saturated ground. Unlike the plains, which we've been seeing third year in a row of drought for some areas. Different story this summer in the Northeast. And of course, storm surge too. Not as dramatic as we see, for example, in Florida with Idalia, for example. This is a different type of coastline, of course, much more rugged. But potentially Massachusetts, Cape Cod area could see a 2 to 4 foot storm surge there. And that's on top of already saturated ground. So you combine all the wind, storm surge, and additional rain, we're looking at potential mess for the Maine area.